Hello, and thank you for attending the 2020 Sunstone Digital Symposium Session 222, titled Learning to Better Support Our Loved Ones' Faith Transition Using Recently Published Church-Approved Sources. Just as a reminder, the audio from the session will be available for purchase after the fact at sunstone.org, and the video recording the session will be available in the Whova app for the remainder of 2020, which means you can come back and watch again. Just a few announcements before we get started into the presentation. We are going to have a Q&A after Trace's remarks, and you can type your questions into the Whova app. So if you're watching, just go ahead and type those as we go, and we'll get to those at the end. At Sunstone, we are trying to make a goal to build a way for more people to express their faith. Our tagline is, "There's more than one way to Mormon." And we invite you to help us build a community where more people can honestly explore their faith journey and be better understood. You can support us in our mission by making a donation or subscribing to Sunstone at sunstone.org. Let me tell you a little bit about this presentation, and then Trace has asked me to give an opening. For many people, navigating a faith crisis, transition, or transformation is a solo proposition with minimal support. Some recent books, including Bridges, Ministering to Those Who Question, can help people better support, engage with, understand, and maintain healthy connections to the one making such a transition. This session will discuss ways to help those within our circle of influence to gain knowledge from church-approved, desert book available sources. The goal is to help everyone foster healthier relationships with those who question, whether they distance themselves or remain engaged with the church. I'm going to introduce Trace Rogers, our speaker. Trace was serving as the Elders Quorum president for 14 years ago, when he went from strong Orthodox conservative belief to atheist in just 2 days. He navigated back to a semi-belief in God and a significantly nuanced belief in the church. He continues to attend and actively participate with his beautiful wife of 26 years and 4 amazing children. He works hard to love and support everyone within his influence and hopes to allow everyone to be imperfect humans, striving for good, who are regularly messing up, sometimes to dire consequences along the way. And with that, I would like to just say a few words. For those who don't know me, my name is Lindsay Hanson-Park. I am the executive director of Sunstone, one of the people that helped organize this conference. So if you're watching, thank you for participating today and having faith in our message. I've been reflecting on what to say as an opening for a session like this, where we're navigating a really difficult space. Trace is going to talk about a really sort of fraught space of tension. It's a place between belief and disbelief. What's that space called? Right there. It's actually like this hairline wire. It's not very big, but sometimes it can feel like a chasm. It's that feeling of being in the same room with someone, knowing them your whole life, and feeling like you couldn't be further apart. The reality of the world that we live in is there are so many people that disagree with us. Even the people that we think agree with us disagree with us all the time. People think differently. There are people that we love and care about who have read different books than we have, or have grown up hearing different sermons than we have. But in Mormonism, it's especially fraught because we try to do our best to read the same texts, to read the same books, to learn the same lessons, to believe the same things. And so we sometimes assume that we're all on the same page. And yet, as if we are like this perfectly landscaped yard, sometimes we grow outside the lines. Sometimes we grow in the cracks in the places where we didn't think things were able to grow. But that doesn't mean that diversity of thought are weeds. It just means they are natural. Natural, organic things grow. That's what they do. And we live in a natural world, a fragile one, where cells grow and build on each other. Faith isn't unlike that, and it can become wild, like a forest. It can be barren, it can be dense or sparse or anything in between. Faith is an organic thing, like we are. I know this not just because of my experiences within my own Mormonism and growing up as a Latter-day Saint woman, where my voice isn't usually seen as authoritative. But I do have something to say and some knowledge behind what I'm saying. I have unique and sometimes unfettered access to some of the most isolated fundamentalist religious groups in the American West. And I'm somewhat of an authority on those things. And I know that's a strange thing to say. I know when I talk about fundamentalist groups or polygamous groups, a lot of people shut down. They say, well, that's too different for me. I don't want to hear about that. That makes me uncomfortable. But I'd invite you to listen to just a few observations I've had growing up as an LDS girl and working in fundamentalist spaces. I grew up with such judgments of these communities. And so it's been really, really interesting to see my own faith and doctrine and theology as an outsider. Because remember, these people follow our same early leaders, they follow our same scriptures, they follow our same hymns. And so I've been forced to confront more of the differences than more of the similarities than the differences. It's such an interesting thing to see someone read from the same book, have the same scriptures that look just like your own, be able to sing the same songs you sang in primary, but they follow a different prophet or leader. The majority of the work that I usually do, especially here at Sunstone, is within my own Latter-day Saint community. But I work in a space that involves over 400 different Mormon breakoff sects from the church. That means there was an original church that Joseph started, and we all branched out, including the LDS. That's what the historical record says. And sometimes that's uncomfortable for people because we want to all think that we're the original church. And let me just tell you this, most of these fundamentalist sects also think that they're original church or that they're restoring the restoration. And that was a big wake-up call to me. We all think that we're right. We all think someone else is wrong. We all think we have the truth. We all think that we're special. And I've had to really sort of question what that means when everybody thinks they're right and everyone is wrong. But I've decided that it's such a gift because we have so much to learn from each other, because we can see where the same scriptures, the same theologies, the same common faith language can sometimes be used as tools to bring happy, healthy lives, to strengthen families, to make people happy, to find and form divine connection. But we also have an opportunity to see where those same doctrines and scriptures can also be used as weapons to harm. And that's what learning about other Mormon sects can do. I spent the last month in Short Creek, which is one of the former headquarters of a sect of Mormonism in its heyday around 20,000 people, called the FLDS, or the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints. This particular group of Mormons practices polygamy. That they worked towards a united effort, and they followed a leader, a prophet named Warren Jeffs. And I can tell you, when I bring his name up, everyone gets uncomfortable. It's like it's some sort of Mormon's Godwin's law where we can't bring it up. And I'm not meaning to suggest that any group is like Warren Jeffs, but Warren Jeffs was the prophet at the time, and they certainly felt about him like many Latter-day Saint people feel about their own leader. And that was really hard for me to watch because I knew that Warren Jeffs had done so much damage. My work with the community the last 5 years has been to help give resources to people that have been harmed by the church leadership. It's been harrowing. As their prophet, Warren Jeffs and other prominent leaders have slowly been imprisoned for terrible crimes, this group of people has to sort of reconcile what happened to them. And so the town of Short Creek is mostly people who have left the church or been sent away from their church, the FLDS church, and they're just sort of stunned, you know. Everyone wants to talk about underage marriages and polygamy. When they talk about the groups, that's what the news focuses on. That's what documentaries and reality TV shows focus on. But I need to tell you that my experience in that group, the most pernicious thing that has happened, the most awful, truly evil thing that has happened is the way that Warren Jeffs was able to use the doctrine and theology to separate families. He used priesthood to separate families, he used worthiness, and he used differences and loyalty to separate family. And I cannot begin to tell you the trauma that has caused. in terms of irreparable loss in relation to how Jeffs used Mormon doctrine to separate relationships. He split up men from their wives and children so that right now no one is with their original spouse, sibling, or parent. And I can't still articulate the damage that has been done. It has been the hardest burden to bear as I watch the fallout from this trauma. All of this was enacted in the name of God. Warren used the idea of proper authority, righteousness, and faith to separate relationships. Over and over, he asked people to draw lines in the sand that separated them from the world. He made a choice, God or the world. From outsiders, he separated them from their authentic selves, and it robbed them of relationships, from the richness of diversity, and from the gifts of curiosity. It caused trauma and pain worlds without end. The damage done from these practices will last for generations. It's truly a cursed thing. That's why I have lost all tolerance for apostasy rhetoric. And what I mean is every Mormon group has some sort of apostasy rhetoric. We like to say who's in, who's out, who gets to believe what, who's good, who's bad. And I'm telling you, my work with the FLDS, the damage I've seen, the lives that are lost, I can't stomach it. I can't. There's no room for it. We don't have time for it. The suicide rate in the ex-FLDS community is nearly one person every other week. It's horrific. And I always thought that growing up, taking the Lord's name in vain was saying the G word, OMG. That's how we took the Lord's name in vain. And I was so careful because I didn't want to take the Lord's name in vain. But now I think how silly that is, how we have this big, grand, omniscient God that can create the world. And he can hold things like, mass rape in the Congo and war and torture and all of these things humans do to each other. And he's going to be offended when I say a word. What I realized is that's a distraction. A belief like that is a distraction, because using God to wound others truly is taking his name in vain, taking children from their mothers, forcing fathers to kick out their children so that their sons live in a shed in the middle of a winter in Wyoming. I've seen that happen many times. I could tell you stories that would make the hair stand on the back of your neck. He did that all in the name of God. When we separate people, when we separate relationships in the name of God, it is a sin. When we use God to harm others, we take his name in vain. Now, does our LDS tradition have such harsh apostasy rhetoric? Probably not always in practice, but sometimes it does in spirit. And that's hard to look at. This is where a lot of brains shut down and say, no, I'm not like that. Why is she saying that? We're not like that. We don't kick our families out. But that's not true. The work I've seen at Sunstone, it happens. It happens more than we'd like to admit. In fact, the homeless youth population in Utah are a majority of LGBT kids kicked out of their homes, their Mormon homes. Now it's getting better. People are working harder, but we are not the city of Enoch yet. We still have high depression rates, high drug use rates, high LGBT suicide rates. And yet we want to distance ourselves from people like the FLDS. We want to say, they're not like us. We're not like that. We're different. We're better. We use the same texts. We use the same doctrines. We use the same scriptures to justify this harm every time. So are we that different in this way? I think if we can humble ourselves, we can use their suffering, their intense, awful suffering, as a mirror, as a cautionary tale. Do we allow faith to separate us in our relationships with our family and loved ones? That's a simple question. Do we do that? Do we let our faith scare us and separate us from diversity, from curiosity, from seeking out brilliance and good things in the world? Here's the harshest truth I've learned spending times with survivors of Warren Jeffs and others. We have this word doubt in all of Mormonism. Doubt's supposed to be a scary thing. Doubt's supposed to be the thing we avoid. But doubt in the FLDS, the thing that they were taught to avoid the most, they tried to just dig that out of them. It was pure loyalty all the time. Doubt didn't destroy those people like Warren Jeffs said it would. It redeemed them. It's the thing that saved them. It was their saving grace. Warren tried everything he could to rid people from this, and yet there it grew. out of the small little cracks in the harsh pavement down there. Rather than follow his example, Warren Jeffs' example, we should be fostering places of doubt, safe places in our garden where we can ask questions. It's healthy. It keeps us humble. It keeps us learning. It keeps us repenting. The only weeds that need to be rooted out is this idea that somehow God is too small to allow us to reside in the space between belief and non-belief. What's that space called? That's faith. That space between belief and non-belief. Our faith needs to be watered with doubts to keep it healthy, to grow. That's how we grow, by being uncomfortable, by being changed. My hope today is that as you listen to Trace's presentation, you have the courage to not only see those who doubt as, to not see those who doubt as evil or wicked. And I will say, if your goal listening here is so that you can help convince someone else, you've already approached this wrong. This should be a presentation where you look at the parts of yourself and say, what work do I need to do? Because we don't change people by judging them. It doesn't happen. You just can't change people by judging them. So my hope is that as you listen, you'll be able to change yourself, to use faith as a tool and not a weapon, to weed out the harmful ways in which you've allowed your faith, your behavior, to be driven by fear and uncertainty, to strive for a perfect, unchanging knowledge. Nothing growing in this world, in this organic world, is static. Nothing is a perfect knowledge. And let's embrace that and incorporate it and help foster it within our communities. So that's my hope. And I want to thank Trace for giving me the time to make this introduction. I have seen Trace grow through this painful space of faith and doubt. You often feel so rejected, so lonely. You're in your own sort of wilderness, as you will. But I'm telling you, that metaphor from the Book of Mormon is so beautiful, to be in your wilderness, because it's such a beautiful place to be sometimes. That's where the learning happens. That's where the growing happens. And I've seen Trace do that. He's got such a kind and generous heart. And we are so lucky to have him at Sunstone. He's donated hundreds of hours and plenty more stress to make this happen, which means his talk today is an act of love. It's an act of love. It's a gift if people are willing to receive it. So thank you, Trace, for allowing me to speak. And I hope everyone's enjoying Sunstone.
Thank you, Lindsay. I really appreciate your words of encouragement to help us, that we can strive to look differently, look at ourselves to see how we can improve and become better people. And I'm really grateful to you for the many things that you're doing in the community to help those to overcome the sometimes oppression that's happening. And I'm grateful for it. So I was honored to be able to have Lindsay participate with me. And again, my name is Trace Rogers. And my topic today is supporting those navigating faith crisis, faith transitions, and/or faith transformations. And what I'd like to cover today is a little bit of my faith journey, and then talk about questions, doubts, and faith journeys through faith crisis. What happens with that? Talk about trust, belonging, and meaning, and the importance of it. And then talking through ministering to the one, building bridges at church, books that help build bridges, and then letting no one walk alone. The goals of this session: I'm hoping that we can work together to learn how to better minister to the one, to build bridges, to show love, to help individuals, including myself, remain within the community of the church, or be allowed to leave with integrity and love, honoring each person's individual faith journey. I'm hoping to help marriages and families stay together and grow stronger, regardless of belief, and to help us all learn how to validate faith journeys, whether in or out of the church, strengthening the feeble knees, mourning with those that mourn, and loving as Christ would have us love. So my ongoing faith journey. I was raised in the church. Frederick G. Williams was my fifth great-grandfather. He was the second counselor to Joseph Smith. I've had many stories of him growing up as a child. I was raised in a very conservative family upbringing. I served a mission in southern France. I married in the temple, served in many callings, including ward missionary, gospel doctor, and elders quorum counselor, ward clerk, elders quorum president. I was temple attending, scripture reading, conference watching, service rendering, actively engaged. In 2006, while I was serving as an elders quorum president, I met with an elders quorum member who was struggling with doubts, who brought questions and concerns that he was having. I wanted to help him, so I decided to do my own research so I can help him answer his questions. And within 2 days of research as an elders quorum president, I went from my strong testimony and everything that I've learned throughout my life to being an atheist. While I was heavily fasting, praying, reading scriptures, seeking and searching to make it all work. A church leader, a loving church leader, counseled me that my concerns were anti-Mormon and were lies. And I just needed to do more fasting, praying, more reading of scriptures. Some of those issues are actually today discussed in the gospel topic essays. Not anti-Mormon lies, but historical documented information. I stayed at church, partly due to the counsel from John DeLynn. He suggested I slow down, find what I loved about church, and if I chose to stay, I could find a way to do so with integrity. I remained the elders quorum president for 18 more months. I strive to help others and be authentic, to have integrity in my teaching. I moved in that time from atheist to agnostic to various levels of belief, but nothing like my past faith. Since that time, there's been many things that have occurred. A couple of major topic points for me on my faith journey. In November 2015, the exclusionary policy was devastating to me, even as a white male with no LGBTQ leanings. Seeing the injustices, that was some of the worst time of my life, and those who know me witnessed that. October 2017, a conference was almost equally devastating because of a talk by Elder Oaks. You know, some weeks are still very hard at church. During COVID, it's definitely a different experience. But as we were attending, some weeks were harder and some weeks were easier. But much has been made more bearable due to the loving efforts of a previous bishop who I had and an amazing stake president, both of whom I admire as close friends, and as those I see truly ministering to me. And I don't know where my faith journey is going to take me, but for now I choose to stay engaged and active at church. And I want to take this moment to just say that, you know, I have not been easy to live with. I actually hid my faith journey from my wife for many years, and I should have trusted her more, and that heartache was difficult for her to bear. I've been angry, I've been difficult, I've been having struggles with my leaders, and I have not figured this all out. But some of the words I'm sharing today are things that I have learned that as I strive to follow them, I am better with those around me, regardless of what's happening. And as I'm saying here that I'm choosing to stay engaged in church, that is not the only journey. There are many ways and many journeys that people go on. And as we honor and respect each individual's journey in and out of the church, we grow stronger as a human family. So let's talk a little bit about bridges, ministering to those who question. Greg Coatford Books in 2019 published a book titled Bridges, Ministering to Those Who Question, written by David B. Osler. David Osler went through, and in his calling at church, he had been associated with young adults, and he saw many, many young adults not attending, and he started reaching out to try to understand the reasons behind that, to if you will, build bridges and collect surveys and learn and grow. And he was able to compile that information that he put together into this book. I would strongly recommend this book to any member of the Latter-day Saint faith or any other faith associated with Mormonism. I think that this is a book that can be used for anybody to help build bridges. This is a book that's available at Deseret Book. Everything that I reference in this presentation today comes from a few books and then a couple other designated quotes, but they're all purchasable from Deseret Book and Amazon and other things. And I specifically did that because so many people if something comes from Deseret Book, it has somewhat of the church's stamp of approval on it, that we can read it and study it and learn from it and share it with others. Another book that I'm referencing is called Planted. It was actually published by Deseret Book in 2015, written by Patrick Q. Mason, something that was actually very instrumental for me. This book is written for individuals who might be struggling with doubts, but also, again, written for those who have loved ones who are. Both of these books, I feel, are books that can be used to help in the journey, not as ways to, if you dot the I's and cross the T's, someone's going to stay. But I do think, though, that these books can help us become a better people so that people might want to choose to stay, to be authentic if they can be, and share their authentic selves with everyone while they're at church. David B. Oswald said, quote, "Bridges are meant to be crossed back and forth. While our efforts may seem in vain at times, building a bridge of compassion and understanding preserves our relationships and gives us a pathway for showing our love," end of quote. A year ago, when this book was published, I actually wrote a lengthy review on Amazon that's still there. And I've never quoted myself before, but I was rereading that in preparation for this presentation, and I thought I would share this of what I wrote a year ago. Quote, "I honor those individuals who choose to take their journeys beyond the walls of church. Simultaneously, I wish there were more who felt safe enough and lived in congregations inclusive enough to stay with integrity and authenticity. If they could be received with open arms as contributing members, regardless of their testimony or statements of faith or literalness of their belief, I believe many more might choose to stay. I know many who truly want to stay engaged, but are not able to do so and maintain their mental and spiritual health," end of quote. Within the book Bridges, David Osler spoke of a man that he called Mike, a 35-year-old member. And this individual shared some things that he needed as he was going through his faith crisis or dark night of the soul. And this strongly resonated with me. Every transition, everybody's journey is different, so it might not resonate with everyone, but it definitely did me. Quote, "When I was in the dark night of the soul, there are a few things that could have really helped me. I needed someone to just listen. And then after listening, let me know and help me really believe that they trusted me and loved me, no matter what conclusion I came to. I needed someone to show me that it was love that was the strongest and largest cord that bound us together, not our common belief in the church. I needed someone to not only listen, but to encourage me to seek answers, to say, great, I don't know where this journey will take you, and it's your own journey. But whatever conclusion you come to, I will absolutely respect you. And if you want someone to walk with for a while on your journey, call me. I'm there for you. I needed someone to let me know that they have never experienced what I'm experiencing, and so they would never pass judgment," end of quote. Patrick Hugh Mason in the book Planted said, quote, "Perhaps the most important thing we can do in the face of our current challenges is to make the church a more welcoming place for those who struggle, creating the condition in which they can feel comfortable while they work through questions and doubts in the midst of the body of Christ, rather than feeling excluded from it. A more embracing Mormonism may thus be the most important factor in helping people be more fully embrace Mormonism," end of quote. And I think this is so important, that this welcoming, this mechanism to allow people to be where they are. And as Lindsay talked about, the space where we might think everyone's in the same space and reading from the same scripts, but they might be in different places. And as we honor that, it allows people to be more authentic and share where they are. So let's talk about a little about questions, doubts, and faith journeys through faith crisis. You know, growing up in the church, there are many instances where we are taught to continue study, to continue reading, to continue thinking, to do those things that we want to continue growing. And Lindsay at the Smith Pettit lecture, she actually quoted for this same quote. I found it several months ago and put it here. For me, it has a meaning in the sense of why people choose to continue to vocalize as they start finding things that might differ from what they were raised. And this is from Thomas S. Monson in 1986, quote, "Let us have the courage to defy the consensus, the courage to stand for principle. Courage, not compromise, brings the smile of God's approval. Courage becomes a living and an attractive virtue when it's regarded not only as a willingness to die manfully, but as the determination to live decently. A moral coward is one who is afraid to do what he thinks is right because others will disapprove or laugh. Remember that all men have their fears, but those who face their fears with dignity have courage as well." And I think growing up, we are taught to do what is right, to choose the right, to make correct choices. And as we continue our journeys through our lives, sometimes we can find that what we feel is right might be different than what we were raised to feel is right. And as we don't feel that others can honor that, it can really be isolating. Hubie Brown said, quote, "More thinking is required, and we should all exercise our God-given right to think and be unafraid to express our opinions with proper respect for those in whom we talk and proper acknowledgement of our own shortcomings. We must preserve freedom of the mind in the church and resist all efforts to suppress it. The church is not so much concerned with whether the thoughts of its members are orthodox or heterodox as it is that they shall have thoughts," end of quote. And I think that that's true. We continue to have thoughts. We continue to grow and learn, and being able to express them in a respectful manner is important. So David Osler put together several surveys, and he wanted to understand where people were in their faith journey when their faith crisis happened. So he asked people about their belief, whether they believed wholeheartedly in the teachings of the church, if they were keeping all the commandments, that they held a temple recommend, attended church weekly, were having meaningful personal prayer, reading the scriptures daily, if they were endowed, were they attending the temple regularly. As I was raised, I was told that people were fence sitters, and that type of those words that are definitely separating for individuals. And I was also told that people were maybe less valiant or less focused on the church if they chose to leave. What David Osler found was absolutely the opposite. People were strong, focused, putting significant effort into the church to dot the I's and cross the T's. And they still went through faith crisis. And this was something that was very harrowing for me to read. There are many causes of a change of faith. There's not one, and everyone's transition or faith crisis is different. And not everyone even goes through a faith crisis in their life. And that's not a bad thing or a good thing. Everyone's journey is unique and different. But there were some common topics that caused a change in faith. Church history, including a simplified view of historical events and how we teach it in our classes in seminaries. Joseph Smith's practice of polygamy. The Mountain Meadows Massacre, Joseph's use of folk magic. Use of a seer stone in translation, the origins of the priesthood ban, social issues, including the church's LGBTQ policies and practices, unequal gender roles, unique millennial issues, concerns about prophetic leadership and revelation, feelings of judgment and anxiety at church, cultural and language issues, political conservatism, mental and emotional challenges. These are all things that can be an impetus to a change in faith. It could be multiple, one or more, and they're all unique and they're all different. From David Osler, quote, "Avoiding difficult subjects is no longer an option for those who wish to build and maintain bridges with those going through a faith crisis. While reading the scriptures, praying, and keeping the commandments are all certainly helpful, they cannot guarantee that someone would not face a challenge to or lose their faith in restoration. Many have lost faith despite doing all these things, and I respect that their study was diligent, that their prayers were sincere, and they didn't have some secret sin preventing them from having the Spirit," end of quote. And I think this is important, that we need to avoid those difficult subjects. We need to be able to talk about them and be respectful and open and discuss that, whether we have answers or not. From Patrick Mason, Implanted, quote, "When a person realizes that at least part of what they are learning for the first time is factually true, not simply the malicious inventions of anti-Mormon propagandists, then they sometimes start to wonder what else they haven't been told. Sometimes this is called the rabbit hole, and that's definitely something that I went through. You find one thing, and that leads to something else, and something else, and something else, and pretty soon you're learning all of these things that you never heard all the way through your childhood, teenage years, adulthood, and it's overwhelming, and it becomes very burdensome to have, and angering sometimes." From David Oster, quote, "Someone who has a faith crisis will likely never be able to believe as they did previously. They need to see a pathway forward that still allows them to find hope, faith, and belief, even as they think about their faith differently." When David Oster was doing his research, he was trying to understand what people needed, because what happens is, as they go through a faith crisis, many of them lose that personal testimony that many in the Latter-day Saint faith feel, and many of the other branches of the restoration. And what he found was common threads of individual things that people needed. And those three common threads were: one, trust. And this is some things that people would say and what they wanted to be able to trust. Even with the limitations of church members and leaders, I have confidence that the church and its leaders will help me find spiritual purpose and guidance. This is what they wanted. This is what they needed. I trust leaders and other members to help me as I make choices for my own spiritual growth. Second, they needed belonging. My ward accepts my authentic self and supports me as I develop my own spirituality and relationship to God. This is what they needed, not necessarily what they found. I feel like I belong, and I feel love, acceptance, and support, even with my differences. Thirdly, they needed meaning and relevance. I feel spiritually lifted when I think of church doctrines and participate in church. This is what they needed. I feel my most important questions are addressed and answered. I feel closer to my heavenly parents and find meaning and direction in the teachings and doctrines of the church. So with that, trust, belonging, and meaning, what can we do and how is that built and unfortunately many times torn down? David Osler, quote, "It's not always apparent when someone has questions or doubts. From the outside, a person may appear to be a fully believing member of the church, when in reality they are struggling with their testimony or desire to participate. The person may be unwilling to trust others with their questions, doubts, and true beliefs." End of quote. Also, for leaders, quote, "If a leader chooses to ignore or dismiss other points of view, they will lose the trust of those they are called to serve. Leaders carry tremendous power to permit temple attendance, to label someone as worthy, and to accept and call members to lead or teach. When they are not cautious about that power, they can inadvertently harm, offend, and lose the trust of others." End of quote. And I do believe that the vast majority of leaders are doing everything that they can to do their best, and we definitely deserve to give them grace for that. And also at the same time, we can do more to try to focus on allowing other points of view. Sometimes when somebody decides to vocalize distrust in church leaders, even just vocalizing, nothing more than vocalizing distrust, unfortunately, some members and leaders have responded in ways that might not be productive, expressing concerns to the bishop that a person is teaching children in Sunday school or primary, made sure that their children spent less time at a person's house, warned neighbors that a person was a potential apostate, released the person from their calling and took away their temple recommend, testified and expressed heartfelt belief that our leaders are called of God and speak with authority on his behalf. And I understand that this can be all well-meaning for individuals to do this. And even this last thing, it's the first thing that I would think to do in my old self, that's what I'd need to do. But in realizing that the experience of the individual you're talking to, they're needing support and not striving to change their thoughts. They need that support so that they can make their own decisions for themselves and see that we love and respect them. Quote, "If we can't be trusted to be kind and understanding members who question will not open to us. If they feel they cannot confide in us, they will suffer from feeling alone at church. They may work things out on their own or in a community that will understand them. If they can't trust us, I believe that most will end up leaving completely." End of quote from David Osler. Patrick Hugh Mason. "Honest doubt is not just a phase like teenage acne or disco, nor is doubt itself necessarily a tragedy. It can become a tragedy when someone's faith crisis is precipitated or deepened because they cannot find an open, candid, and supportive place to work through their sincere questions." End of quote. And Lindsay spoke about this in her introduction about doubt and how doubt is actually something that helps us grow. Our restoration movement started because Joseph Smith had doubts and he was seeking answers to questions. I attended Bob Reese had a Why I Continue to Stay session 2 days ago. And he talked about how doubt helps us grow. Doubt helps us find answers. Doubt is a great thing. And so it's a matter of making sure that we can make space for doubt and allowing doubt to be a good thing as people go through and we work to help people in their journeys. So how can we build trust? Listen, listen, and listen, and listen some more. Don't rebuke testify, or try to explain away individuals' concerns. Ask questions that seek to understand their concerns. Don't assume their concerns are the result of sin, laziness, or some other fault. Just accept that their concerns are real to them. And don't label them with negative terms such as doubter, non-believer, and certainly not apostate. Listening is the key, and that is difficult to do. We need to keep their concerns in confidence. Don't disclose what they share with you to church leaders or members without their permission. Someone has come to you to share their doubts. They're being significantly vulnerable with you, and we need to be able to respect and honor that vulnerability and show trust that we can keep those confidences. It's okay to ask if you can share that with somebody else, and then respect their responses. Try not to tell them how they should feel. Take steps to address their concerns. For example, if they're concerned about the role of women in church, then speak up and work to find appropriate ways for greater involvement and participation by women in your ward and stake. Be their voice and advocate on their behalf. Many times they don't feel like they have a voice because their voice will be shut down if they vocalize it. You have been trusted to be shared their vulnerability. Be a voice for them and an advocate on their behalf. There's additional actions leaders might take to gain more trust. Praying to know which church members understand modern challenges of faith and could be called to serve in leadership. Proactively asking millennials, particularly those concerned with LGBTQ and women's issues, to be involved in leadership, teaching, and council meetings, sacrament meetings, and other teaching settings. Using councils to identify key faith issues that may need attention and inviting those with unique perspectives to provide input and advice. Using a teaching council meeting to address methods of teaching that create trust, belonging, and meaning for class participants. Quote, many members who find themselves no longer believing or who are unsure what to believe are looking for ways to move forward in or out of the church. And in developing their faith, they are deciding what they believe and are trying to find peace amidst the newfound uncertainty of their beliefs. For some, their past world is shattered and they are alone trying to find their way. Can they still believe in God? Can they trust church leaders? Do they belong in our community? How will they raise their children? What does it mean for their temple marriages? Will their family and friends reject them? These are all questions that they're posing and going through. How many of these questions could we change our manners and demeanor so that they wouldn't even need to question some of those things and make their transition, make their journey easier and seeing love in their lives? Belonging to church. So David Osler also wanted to understand those going through faith crisis, how well they felt about church and their experiences with church. He asked questions like, I feel like I belong in my ward. I feel like I belong in the church. I can be authentic with my ward about the major issues in my life. My ward accepts me as I am. My personal differences divide me from others at church. You might be understanding that 67% didn't feel, and this is a survey that was surveyed numerous individuals over a period of time. 67% didn't feel like they belonged in their ward. 80% didn't feel like they belonged in the church. 2/3 didn't feel like they could be authentic in their ward. It was neutral on whether they even felt their ward accepted them as they were. 88% felt like their personal differences divided them from others at church. But this last one, I want to belong to the church community if I can be who I am. 89% wanted to belong. And that's not saying that, again, if they could want to belong, people will still have their journey and they need to be able to be honored in that. But how many want to be able to belong if they can be authentic to who they are and feel like that they can have that authentic self at church? David Osler, quote, all church members ought to feel like they belong, whether they are gay, straight, Republican, Democrat, childless, single, divorced, educated, Black, Native American, poor, young, or old, or whether they have doubts. We want all to sing with authentic feelings, I belong to this Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If we accept the responsibility of making our homes and church meetings more welcoming and loving places, withholding judgment as much as we can, then we will have taken a major step forward in building a bridge that those in a faith crisis will want to cross. End of quote. Patrick Hugh Mason, in his book Planted, the church is made up of its members. In many significant respects, we are the church, and we determine its course and future. A few years ago, a leading Mormon feminist scholar visited my classroom. When a student asked her why she chose to remain in the church, she responded simply, "Why should I leave? It's my church too." It would be so much that people could feel that they can do that and that they could feel that they could stay. There are some practical things that can be done, helping building a sense of belonging. And these aren't, again, necessarily ways to guarantee people stay. Again, the goal is not to help people stay. The goal is to help build a space where if people want to stay, that they can feel healthy in doing that and that they can build their faith where they are. We can simplify. Since we can't do it all, don't try. We can creatively try to work it out. Find compromises that work for many. Don't just impose our ideas on everyone else. Find ways to show sensitivity and compassion for others. We can create spaces of inclusion, make church a place where all types of people want to be and where they feel genuinely valued when they are there. We can make a place for ourselves and others. Church ought to be spacious enough that almost anyone can make a place for themselves. And by the way, this is all from Patrick Hugh Mason's book, Planted. Use church to accomplish good things. Sometimes the best way to use the church is to allow others to serve us in the best way they know how. And work with church leaders to create a church where people's legitimate concerns can be heard and their experiences honored. We have to build the confidence that members and leaders of the church can work together and listen to one another. Ministering to the one. And I know that in the LDS Church Latter-day Saints, as we've moved from home teaching and visiting teaching to ministering, and that's the focus, really it's about ministering to the one. It's about, and not as a goal, but to truly minister. From Patrick Mason, quote, "To love others, to be in true relationship with them is to mourn with them when and how and where they are mourning, to comfort them when and how and where they need comfort, to know in depth and detail what their burdens are so you can help lighten them." And I have personally experienced in the last 48 hours where the love of those around me have supported my family in crisis. People that have reached out, people who have took action, and people who showed me and my family love. And that is something that meant a lot to me. And it was overwhelming to me when I felt that. And can we continue to do the same with someone who might be going through a faith crisis, a transformation, their journey's changing, that we can be the love them? I felt love, and not as a way to help me or want me or make me stay at church. I just felt love. And that's so important. Several months ago, I was searching the Facebook, as I'm doing quite often, and I ran across this poem. This poem was titled "Love is the Key." It was very touching to me, and it hit my heart. And I reached the end of the poem, and then I read the title's author, Jonathan C. Rogers, and my heart stopped. Jonathan Clement Cecil Rogers is my youngest brother, and I'm honored to have him today be our moderator for the question and answer session of the portion of this presentation. I'd like to read this to you with his permission. Love is the key that opens passage doors, that illuminates new horizons that weren't there before. Love is the key that unlocks troubled hearts, that frees souls of sadness, that listens in the dark. Love is the key that heals open wounds, that sutures separate families, that welcomes home soon. Love is the key that sees the inner good, that recognizes beauty, that expresses understood. Love is the key that shows a better way, that holds us all tightly, that yearns for us to stay. Love is the key that gives to everyone, that shares the human experience, that offered us his son. Love is the key that we need to get along, that we are all alike, that we all belong. Love is the key to all of this. It's true love, not love for a goal, not love for a project, just unconditional love. And I don't have this all worked out, and I mess it up all along, but love is the key. From Fiona Givens, an incredible quote: "Every Latter-day Saint who wishes to bear one another's burden must first touch the person's cross to understand the nature and depth of the pain being carried. It is only then that the other person can truly mourn with the one that mourns," part of our baptismal covenants. We have to be able to try to understand someone, to try to be able to be there where they are. So what I'd like to do is have each of us visualize how your church experience or life experience or faith experience would feel. And this by no means is something that is an impetus to faith journeys, etc. But as we strive to think about others differently and think about how others' experiences are, we can then realize what we should maybe try to do differently as we do things. So how would your experience be for you if you were a young man who returned home early from his mission because of mental health? If you're one who reads, studies, and prays and has only a hope that the gospel is true? A single woman who will likely never marry? Anyone who struggles with perfectionism in a church that stresses worthiness? A woman who sees much of the Old Testament or Book of Mormon as non-literal stories? A closeted single gay man? Part of a couple who are unable to have children? A man who struggles with issues in church history? A young person whose parents both work? As we strive to visualize other people's experiences, we can open our hearts and we can see ways that we realize that we are unintentionally saying things that could hurt and harm. And as we strive, we can try to do better. It's a work in progress. It takes lifetimes. David Ostler, quote, "Either we can help build trust and belonging for people, or we can push them away. The way we treat others determines the level of their trust in our relationship with them and our professed belief in Christ. If they trust us, they are more likely to be who they really are, to be authentic with us, and to feel a sense of belonging." End of quote. If we want others to speak to us openly and honestly, we must do our part to relieve their concerns and fears. We can do that by being completely sincere and caring when talking to people about their thoughts on belief and the church. So there are some statements that can help reassure and allay people's concerns. And as I list these, they can't be trite. They truly have to be sincere, to be heartfelt, and to be, it's easy to feel when somebody's not being sincere. No matter what you say, I will love and respect you. I understand you have different beliefs, and it won't change our friendship. I will do my best to understand your perspective and your feelings. I promise to keep this conversation confidential. I will just listen. I won't preach, give advice, or tell you that you are wrong. Tell me why you are concerned about telling me about your beliefs. Even if you hold different beliefs than I do, I know you are a good person. I love you. The one that touches the most. Listening means that we see people as they are. We recognize and respect their right and position to hold opinions and beliefs that are different than ours. From David Ostler. How do we avoid alienating behaviors? There are so many things that we've done, even inadvertently, that are very alienating as people go through their journeys of faith. As we strive to formulate a response instead of listening, and I do this often, and this is something I'm continuing to work on, if you're thinking about a response to someone, then you're not listening to them. Listen instead of trying to formulate a response. Preaching and giving unwanted advice, turning the conversation to ourselves, judging, choosing offense, tares to separate ourselves, the tares and the wheat, a story that's often told. Tares tear down people, wheat builds and grows. Manipulating, not knowing when to stop. Additionally, labeling, apostate, cafeteria Mormon, doubter, intellectual, fallen, non-believer, lukewarm, heretic, gone to the dark side, road to apostasy, feminist, too educated. These are all terms that tear down and not build up. Quote, "It's not just the labels that hurt. They are often said with a tone intended to minimize, exclude, or shut down a person. Labeling someone sends a message to them and to others to behave and believe in a certain way, or else they too will be labeled, categorized, and judged." End of quote from David Ostler. So how can we create a loving relationship? We can express empathy, building positivity, and validating. Ministering may start with listening, but to be truly effective, it must move further and include support, comfort, and mourning, and love. In short, empathy. Just as Jesus expressed empathy in each situation, we must also attune ourselves to the different needs of others. Empathy means we can feel what is in the other person's heart, we know, not just in our brains, but in our hearts, their challenges, pains, sorrows, and joys. Quote, part of showing empathy is letting others be in pain if that's what they are feeling. We show more support if we acknowledge that their pain exists and join them in their pain than if we were to try to cheer them up, end of quote. From Patrick Mason, family, friends, home and visiting teachers, Relief Society and Quorum Presidency, bishoprics and stake leaders can't cure cancer, but they can provide support, relief, comfort, strength, a listening ear, and love. Most people with honest questions and struggles, which to be clear are not a form of cancer, want and need no more, no less, end of quote. Building positivity. All successful relationships are based on a foundation of positivity. Even in moments of conflict or disagreement, we can find ways to be positive. We need to make the foundation of our relationship positive and make sure negative interactions don't define how we relate to one another. Quote, with awareness, we can almost always find positive ways to relate to those who are undergoing faith transition. We can find ways to set aside our different viewpoints and fears and set a positive tone by reassuring them of our acceptance and showing them love and compassion. End of quote. And I forgot to mention every one of these slides, I put at the bottom a reference to where it can be found in the books or who gave them so that it's a reference for later. Validating. Validating is showing others both during and after listening that we accept and respect them and their feelings and experiences. If our purposes is to build a strong relationship, our best response is to validate them by accepting the reality of their feelings. There's always more that we can do to listen, understand, and build meaningful relationships based on Christ-like attributes. There's a lot of good validating language. Thank you for explaining. I can see how hard this is for you. Tell me more. When did you start feeling this way? Okay, I see. Let's talk about building bridges at church. There are things that leaders can do that we can help build more bridges at church. There are possible sacrament meeting topics that we can use to minister more, learning to listen with empathy and love, understanding how we can sometimes be judgmental, creating a culture of belonging, understanding everyone is loved and valued by God. Additionally, understanding why diversity strengthens us, ministering to those who question, eliminating racism in our church, community, and lives, ministering to those with mental challenges. And if we want to do more in depth, there's Fifth Sunday lessons that could be used to help minister. Responding to the needs and challenges of LGBTQ members and their families, including addressing the high rates of suicide. I have seen congregations having topics on this and building and strengthening war families and learning to be better as human beings in doing this and discussing this openly. Better accommodating persons with disabilities, autism, and other needs, and learning to better incorporate them in our classes, worship, and activities. Understanding the unique generational concerns, particularly those of millennials. Understanding ways we feel shame and its impact on our relationship with God and in our wards and families. And learning about the gospel topic essays and how to respond to challenges of church history. So some books to build bridges. As I mentioned, Bridges, Ministering to Those Who Question, incredible book that I'd strongly recommend to everyone to read. Planted, again, from Patrick Q. Mason in 2015. Additionally, at Deseret Book, you can purchase Women at Church, which is a great book by Nelaine McBain. Crucible of Doubt, Evolving Faith. Letters to a Young Mormon. Up until recently, every year, every graduating high schooler in my ward, I handed out this book. With COVID, I didn't this year, but I'll continue to do so. A great book by Adam S. Miller. First Principles and Ordinances, The God Who Weeps. One additional one is Navigating Mormon Faith Crisis, a simple developmental map. This is not in Deseret Book, but by Thomas Wortham McConkie. It's more academic, but I really enjoyed it for my journey. So in conclusion, church-approved books are available at Deseret Book that can help us provide better support as we strive to build and maintain bridges. There are many reasons that trigger faith crisis, faith transition, and/or faith transformation. We can learn to better support our loved ones by building and maintaining trust, providing belonging, meaning, and showing love. Our goals should be showing empathy, building positivity, validating and working to understand and acknowledging pain and loss. We can all work to better visualize what life might be like for others around us. As leaders, we can work to strengthen our wards and stakes by expanding understanding and learning to be more inclusive of our faith journeys and differ from our own. And we can have sacrament meetings and Sunday school lessons that discuss these topics. We can extend everyone the love and respect to navigate their own journeys the way they deem best for themselves, even if it differs from our own. So this presentation, I want to let you know that if this presentation was helpful, I hope that you might be able to share it with loved ones, church leaders, and others. I've made multiple versions of it online in Keynote, slides, PowerPoint, and PDF. And there will be a link to my Google Drive folder in the heading of this presentation session within the Whova app right after this session. Additionally, if you have a phone on you right now in your hand, if you were to open up the photo app right now and focus it on this image on the right, it will actually pop open a link that will say, open this web link. When you take it there, it will take you to the web link. I have two versions of the presentation, one without my personal information in it that's more general for use. I feel welcome to edit it, etc. And the other one is the original Suntone session presentation. Finally, let no one walk alone. And I know we're short on time. I apologize for that. Let no one walk alone. If everything we strive to do, look to the beautiful primary song, often heard in primary. It can be a daily mantra as we all work towards building and maintaining bridges. The song's title is I'll Walk With You by Carolyn Pearson. I am actually the primary chorister in my ward and have been for 2.5 years, and I love it. If humankind would follow the songs of primary, and I'm not saying I sing all the songs, there are songs that I choose not to sing in primary, but so many of them are about love, inclusion, and just helping others. I recommend looking into the history and background of this beautiful song to help you learn. If you don't walk as most people do, some people walk away from you, but I won't. If you don't talk as most people do, some people talk and laugh at you, but I won't. I'll walk with you, I'll talk with you. That's how I'll show my love for you. Jesus walked away from none. He gave his love to everyone, so I will. Jesus blessed all he could see, then turned and said, come follow me. And I will. I'll walk with you, I'll talk with you. That's how I'll show my love for you. I hope that we can all show love, that we can all support each other in their journey, everyone's journeys, that people will feel that they can be included and that we can include everyone of different faith beliefs and understanding, that people will feel welcome to stay if they choose to. And they will also feel welcome to go if they feel so inclined. And that is the end of what I have. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jonathan for the Q&A.
Yes, and we got permission to go about 10 minutes over, so we do have some questions, Trace. The first question that was posted that has the highest votes, it said, great presentation. What advice do you have for those in a mixed faith marriage or with family members who may be more true believing on how to share your new position while honoring theirs?
That is hard. It is difficult because everyone's journey is different. And so while your journey has brought you to a different place from where you were before, your family might not yet be there. And as you strive to give them space for where they are, you can try to share things. Some things you can do is sharing books like this. Many people choose to share books with you when you were going through a faith journey. And sometimes, unfortunately, those were trying to sway you to continue in your journey and to bring you back. And I think that, again, it was done with love. And so I think that as we're showing love, there's things that we can do to try to help people open hearts. And again, I'm trying to go through and make space for people to be able to stay. I'd love people to be able to feel comfortable staying at church. That our spaces can be more inclusive, but it's not always easy. And so I mourn for you as you strive to help your family see your faith differently. And I hope that their hearts can be opened. And sometimes it's just time. Time can soften people and open them up to new understandings.
Great, thank you. The next question says, it sounds like you have overall had good experiences with leadership. Knowing that this will vary, leadership roulette, how do you suggest people approach uploading it all on a bishop. Caution.
Yes, that is hard. There is leadership roulette, and I have to say that I have privilege. I had many callings over the years in leadership. I grew close to the bishop that I had, the stake president that I had worked with him. They saw me serving next to them. So I'm a white cisgendered male with privilege. And I realize that so many people don't have that privilege, and that they can be looked at as the outsider or the black sheep almost immediately. I think, honestly, I still come back to sharing books like this. If you can share a book from Deseret Book and say, hey, this is a great book that helped me and it might be helpful to you in understanding. I just heard through the grapevine, they are recording an audio version of this book, and I've heard who is going to be doing that audio version. It hasn't been publicly announced, so I won't mention it here, but I'm really, really excited that the Bridges book will be in audio form. There are many people who prefer that. But I think that that's something you can do. It's starting. And you do have to, unfortunately, be cautious. Sometimes you can share, and you can even just vocalize your distrust in a leader because of where you are, and that can be detrimental to your ability to stay. And I'm sorry for that. And I wish the church were better, that we can be better as a people. And, but yeah, trying to do small things and then hoping that they can honor you where you are.
The next question is, hi, Trace. Nice presentation and summary of Bridges Implanted. Do you think these messages regarding unbelievers who stay are shared with church leaders? Do leaders currently preach these messages at General Conference, or are they leaving these messages on the shelves of Deseret Books? In which case, most members will never get any of this advice.
That is so true. And sorry, I'm an emotional guy anyways, to ask anybody around me, but I wish more than anything that this type of topic could be taught in General Conference, that this topic could be the focus of things moving forward. And I've started looking at history of Deseret Book and how things have changed. And I've found, and I know, unfortunately, the church moves slower than we would want, but I've found that as things start getting into Deseret Book, over the years, those topics start swaying into General Conference, and they start getting into lessons. But you're right. The piece ends up being is sharing books like this becomes a ground level effort, trying to go through. And a good man once said that prophecy is a top-down effort as well as a bottom-up effort. And I think that doing things bottom-up, you're right, until it's being shared from the top down, it's hard and it's difficult because other words are said sometimes that are very hurtful to me and many others. But I do think that we can make changes, and it is difficult.
Trace, I hope you don't mind if I add one thing to this. So this did actually happen for me personally and also for Trace, where our father actually read Bridges because his Elders Quorum presidency got the book, and all of them read it and encouraged their Elders Quorum to read it. And our father read it. And I can't tell you the transformation that he has gone through over the last year, becoming more loving. He's been validating. He's been having empathy. It's been huge. So this question is very personal for me because I've seen that in my own father that I never thought I would see. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any other questions? We have about 2 more minutes. I think they said we can go over about 10 minutes. So
the next question is, I think doubt is best handled at the ward level, but what would you like to see happen at the top in official capacity? This is kind of similar to what you just said, but I don't know if you want to add anything.
I definitely, I can't dictate to church leaders what they should do, but then at the same time, somebody's asking me to go through and say, I think the more we can share, and there have been some talks about openness that, come back, there's a space for you. And those have been far and fleeting. I think the more we can do to go through and share, I would love it to see in a church talk where it was said, never send your children out of your home because they choose not to believe, or they might be LGBTQ. That is something that's non-Christ-like. I would love it to be said that we have a space for you. We want you to be able to be authentic And it's okay if you don't believe the tenets of the church, that you can stay, and we are going to train our leaders to do better. Those are things that are going to continue happening. But it would be wonderful to be able to hear that, because you're right. When it's heard in the pulpit in general conference is when it makes the most difference to start swaying the minds of the members of the church.
All right, this might be the last question. Okay, does it seem that in some church-approved writings on this topic, the constant message is never give up and only happy outcome is return to church? Thinking of recent articles. Not exactly a question, but kind of a comment.
Yeah, no, that's true. And that's the piece that I'm trying to say is different. And I understand the pastoral mechanism for leaders of the church is striving to help members find a way back, right? It's the lost sheep, the story where I'm seeking the lost sheep. And, you know, the shepherd found the sheep and put it on the shepherd's shoulder. The shepherd was helping the sheep. And I love the phrase, not all who wander are lost. And I do think that you are correct, that it is talked many times that happiness can only be found in church. And I think that some of that dialogue is changing, and that, yes, I think happiness can be found where we are loved and honored for our journeys, that we can feel we can be our authentic selves, whether we have a full testimony of all of the characteristics and perspectives of the church, or whether we just hope to, or whether we don't, but we like this aspect or that, and we just choose to stay. And then if we do, then that we can truly find happiness in that. Or if we choose not to stay, that we can truly find happiness there. And I hope that dynamic can continue to change. I mean, I do see perspectives of the church that are very joyous for me, but I also see hurtful things as well. And that I honor those journeys where people shouldn't have to suffer and hurt. They should be able to find healthy spaces for themselves.
Well, I think that we're at time. I do want to encourage everyone that if your questions were not answered, I know that Trace can actually respond in the comments in Whova. So this is the close of the session. We'd like to thank you for attending and also for supporting Sunstone. And Trace, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for attending, everyone. Appreciate you. And I'll reach out to me on Whova, and I'll reach out back to you.